Sådär. God förmiddag och hjärtligt välkomna till dagens webbinar som vi håller med vår leverantör Dropsuite. I dagens webbinar så kommer vi fokusera på deras Entra ID backup-tjänst som är ny. Den har vi sålt nu i någon månad eller två genom oss, men det är först nu vi går ut här för att meddela er ytterligare och ge er en bättre inblick i vad det här är för någonting och hur ni kan hjälpa era kunder med att implementera det här där ute. Det är en viktig del i helheten när det kommer till cybersäkerhet. Framförallt så sker ju mycket intrång den vägen. Där vill man ju försäkra sig om att man har ett bra skydd om olyckan är framme. Se till att alla inställningar och grupper och liknande är backade. Så att jag kommer att inom kort lämna över med varm hand här till Dropsuite. Innan dess såklart vi kommer höra av oss efter webbinariet. Ni är välkomna att kontakta er kontaktperson på Gridart. Ni kan också mejla direkt till sales@gridart.com. Om det är så att ni inte har någon ni pratar med direkt så kan vi ordna en one-to-one demo efter givetvis. Som vanligt erbjuder vi på Gridart svensk support, så ni som redan jobbar med oss är medvetna om det. Vi har en marknadsplats där man kan gå in och beställa den här tjänsten. Finns upplagd. Allt för att göra det enkelt för er så att ni kan få ut ett bra faktureringsunderlag helt enkelt från vår plattform fördelat på era slutkunder. I övrigt som sagt vi kör igång. I will leave it over to you James. Take it away.
Right, thank you. So yeah, good morning everybody and thank you for joining. My name is James Corbishley. I'm Partner Services Manager at Dropsuite, and today we are going to discuss the importance of backing up your customers' Entra environments. So let's get started. Approximately probably about 25 minutes or something like that. Got a fair few slides to go through today, but let's get started. So briefly the agenda. So for those of you that haven't heard Dropsuite, I'll very quickly pass over who we are, where we operate, etc. And then we'll dive directly into why Entra backup is critical, some hints and tips on how to sell it to your clients, and what Dropsuite Entra backup offers today. I'm going to show you some UI. It's not actually going to be a demo, but I'm going to show you some of the UI, slides of the UI, and then lastly we'll have some Q&A. So let's jump in and discuss quickly about Dropsuite. So who is Dropsuite? So Dropsuite offers obviously a backup solution. We have data centers all around the globe that allow your partners to access and keep their data in region. But essentially we are a SaaS tool that allows fast recovery and allows compliance and also, as we're discussing today, the ability to back up Entra components. So for those of you who haven't heard of us, we work with about across the globe many MSPs, about over 4,000 MSPs, and about 1.5 million users across 140 customers. One of the key things we really do pride ourselves is our customer satisfaction. So we've got a very heavy focus on support, and that has provided us with a 99% CSAT score. So again, who is Dropsuite? So we take a partner first approach. So nearly 100% of our clients are actually serviced through distributors, such as GridHeart, and therefore we won't compete directly with partners. What we do is we actually work directly with our partners. So we provide solution pricing, all designed to support the MSP business model. So right from the start, roughly 12 years ago when we started, our mission has been to help MSPs grow through scalable, reliable and easy to manage backup services. Quick overview of what Dropsuite helps you protect. So at the core of our SaaS offering is obviously Microsoft 365. It's clearly the biggest kind of cloud service vendor in terms of what we support. We also support Google Workspace. Talking about Entra ID today. We also got a couple of peripheral things around web-based website and database backups. And we've also got a couple of other offerings on the side in terms of backups. We have something called Partner Services, which helps and works with you to actually move data over from third-party systems should you wish to come to Dropsuite. But let's talk about a little bit more about some of the limitations of Microsoft 365. So this is really key and why we explain to our customers why backup is a non-negotiable thing. So cloud resellers like Microsoft and Google follow what we call a shared responsibility model. So what they say is they're responsible for the platform availability and infrastructure, but you as the MSP are responsible for your client's data. And that's why Microsoft includes something, what we call the Clause 6B in their service agreement, which says we recommend you regularly back up your data using a third-party service. Okay, so Microsoft specifically mentioned this. They back, obviously they have the cloud solution and they provide 99% and 99.9% uptime for their platform, but they don't provide that kind of DR capability or recovery of the content. So, what happens potentially when ransomware hits? Microsoft's own documentation says, step one, verify your backups, right? So it's key really to offer backups as part of your solution to your customers. So just a quick overview of what's different between Dropsuite and some of the other backup solutions. So I guess one of the key things is how comprehensive our one platform is. So it's one UI accessing your backups, searchability, archiving content, e-discovery components are in there, and which allow you to look up retention and compliance policies, but they're all in a single interface. So no toggling between products, just simply log in and you can very easily see who you're protecting and access the data that you have backed up. It's just basically it's automation that just works. That's kind of the strap line that we use and we hear from our customers is that, yeah, I just literally just set up Dropsuite, very easy, couple of clicks, set up in 5 minutes, and it just sits in the background and works. We do believe that backup should literally be set and forget. So you're not just constantly manually running jobs, worrying about whether or not it's worked. With Dropsuite, one setup, it just runs and you get nice automated notifications and things like that to allow you to understand the coverage. We also believe in the importance of high frequency backups. So we are aware that disaster can strike at any time, which is why we back up data, email data specifically 12 times a day. You'll see with the Entra backup, which we're discussing specifically today, we do have a once a day policy, but also the ability to do a backup immediately. So if you, for instance, create a third-party app or you've made some changes to your Entra environment, updated job titles, locations, etc., you can hit the backup now button and it will do a snapshot of that at that point in time. The key thing, obviously, as a kind of backup tool is that enterprise grade security. So we obviously take our security very seriously. We use military grade encryption. All of our data centers meet, FISMA, ISO 27001, all the usual standards. We have a 99.99% availability to your system. We also have unlimited storage, one flat price. We don't say pay per gigabyte. We have unlimited storage, obviously based on what we call a fair use policy. But there's no tiers. It's monthly paying. There's no hidden fees. So you pay for what you get, and you know exactly what those fees are going to be month on month. based on the number of seats that you purchase. Briefly over compliance management, as well as the backup piece of Entra and your core kind of components of 365, we offer some compliance management tools which allow you to then get into your kind of regulatory compliance piece. We provide some enhanced data management solutions, e-discovery, legal hold. We've got automated policy violation detection, which allows support for your DPOs, your data protection officers, real-time journal, etc. So yeah, some great pieces that sit on top of that core that core backup capability. But we really do focus on our customers. We focus on enhancing the product to make sure that the product's as good as we can be. We've got 59% of our team is in product and engineering. So we're super laser focused on backup, archiving and compliance, which is why we've been named the #1 backup cloud provider by Software Review for 5 consecutive years. And that builds onto that 99% support satisfaction I mentioned earlier. So our support teams are constantly looking to make sure that they provide the support that customers expect and need. Lastly, it's that kind of relentless product innovation. We really like to, push forward, make sure we're ahead of the curve, which is why one of the reasons we've produced this Entra piece is we believe that's really core to the backup solutions as well. So let's talk more about Entra. This is the reason for the webinar today. So what is Entra? So the focus on what I'm going to share with you today is kind of how to have a conversation with your customer about the critical importance of investing in protection for Entra. So a great place to start is to kind of understand what Entra is. So for most people, their first thought is Entra is the new name for Azure AD, right? And while that's true, Entra is a lot more than kind of a rebranded Active Directory. So we still think of it in terms of legacy Active Directory, but because it is linked directly to 365, there are all the security principles and many of the components that link into Entra around things like Intune device management policies, and it's not just about literally a login and access to core components like email and a login to access other shared services. So for many smaller organizations that have been around for a long time, that have had on-prem infrastructure, now Active Directory was likely used, somewhat on a basic function. So as I mentioned, just allowing you to log in, get access to your Exchange mailbox. But with Entra, it's a lot more than that. It's, defines and manages your licenses, security policies, single sign-on, third-party applications, etc. So it's becoming a really critical component of how you access and control your information, your company information. So the first point to land is that, Entra is a different workload to kind of Active Directory, and because it's doing more, it's more important to protect it, as I mentioned. So let's dive into some of the reasons why backup is critical. Again, we kind of step back to Microsoft's Clause B in the earlier slides, but here's the specific Entra version. And in Microsoft's own kind of words, they are saying bad things will happen and you need to be ready for it. So just because you've never been able to restore AD doesn't mean you're never going to have to or want to restore Entra. And it's not just about restoration. It's all about point-in-time management or being able to see what changes have been made in your environment as you kind of work through the administrative functions of Entra. So a key point there is to make your customers aware that it's a Microsoft best practice. And also important to note, the value of the backup is not just the ability to restore, but it's about documenting prior states, as I mentioned, and the ability to restore prior configuration if something was overwritten by accident. So it's not just about restoring everything, it's about understanding the development of Entra, what's been added, what might have changed. And To be clear, sort of Microsoft is very clear about the kind of human risk element. So I've got a quick example of what that might look like. So in terms of human error, so what we're talking about here is, a customer might ask you to do an import of information. They provide you with CSV. You import it using PowerShell, and then the customer says, that information was the incorrect CSV, and you've already imported it. So things like job titles or names, etc., may have changed. It's that human error element is critical, which potentially can damage or corrupt your Entra information. So, installing third-party apps may make unexpected changes, doing, classic admin tasks in terms of, doing guest cleanups, doing cleanups, so guest accounts, or accidentally deprovisioning a workstation, etc. So the key thing here is just understanding the human error element. On the slides, you'll see, roughly what the ROI is, and these are in US dollars. But it kind of explains, if you spend 2.5 hours a year fixing or checking elements of Entra, that will potentially cover the cost of the licensing. And you look at what Atlassian has actually published. They're talking about between $1 and kind of $500 per minute of downtime for a small business. So depending on obviously the severity of the change, there can be financial consequences to that as well. So it's all about return on investment, making sure you're covered, and to avoid those, or the ability to restore from those human errors. Well, on top of the human error, obviously the big thing is around cybersecurity incidents, right? So what we're seeing increasingly is that Entra is a real focal point for attackers, right? And you need to protect yourself against this. SMBs are becoming a target of cyber attacks. We've all heard in the news about some of these larger organizations being hit, but now we're hearing and listening information about the fact that because SMBs are typically smaller and maybe don't spend or invest as much in their security, around 61% of cyber attacks do affect SMBs, and 40% of those experience at least 8 hours of downtime. So again, Entra is your kind of entry point, right? It's if the cyber attack hits this, and it will lock you out of your Entra environment, you can't do anything. You can't access any of your services, and you can't log in and change or check your security principles. So really, really important. Very briefly, just to kind of touch on the SKUs, the SKUs. So the way that Entra is kind of built into the backup or into the licensing model is based on, we've got 2 SKUs, backup and archiver. You can bolt Entra onto both of those. So it's just a simple add-on there. Right, let's dive quickly into, just looking at the time here, about 80 minutes past. So I'm going to briefly show you what the Entra backup UI kind of looks like. So when you go into, if you're familiar with the Dropsuite portal, you log into the partner portal, which allows you to see all of the customers you're managing, and then allows you to go directly into backup your 365 data and look at that. Very similar to that, accessing the Entra backup, or when you go into the partner portal, you'll get a selection which will just say access Entra portal or access 365 or GWS, Google Workspace portal. So at the top of the screen, you'll see this access Entra portal. You'll click on that, and then you'll be dropped directly into the list of tenants. Click on a tenant, and then you will see what objects are available for restore. And what you'll see directly here is obviously all the object types and the things that we back up, number of snapshots that have been taken, and you can dive directly in and see. So some of the things that have just recently been released at the bottom here are conditional access policy backup, which includes things like authentication strengths, devices and Intune, device policies. And this element of Entra kind of underpins what the MSP is looking to protect for the customer. So once you kind of dig in, in fact, I'll just take a step back. So in the example here, we're going to click into the user kind of folder. When you click in the users, you obviously get to see, and just showing you an example of what you see when you look at the user objects. Well, you can immediately see here the time frames. You can see when the most recent changes were made. Under here, when the first backup was taken and how many snapshots you've got. So really important here, you can just directly come in and see when the most recent was changed. So one of the key kind of pieces around the Entra backup that we do is we only take a snapshot or only update that change when an attribute or user object has changed, which means that obviously you can see unique changes per user. On the next screen, what you'll see is the user attributes when we drill down into a specific user and the changes that were taken by the latest snapshot. So you'll see those highlighted in red. An example here, you can see job title, city, office locations, etc. have been updated. You'll see the live value and what the backup value was. On the top of the screen, you can see the drop down where you can actually look at the different snapshots. So you can take a point in time reference to look back in time and see what the backup value was versus the live value. So again, you can kind of see back in time what changes have been made. So again, if you've installed like a third-party application or something or made some changes, you can see exactly when those amendments to Entra have been made. So again, that kind of documentation or understanding about changes in your environment is all very clear and easy to see. But if you did want to restore back to a previous version, you would simply click on the restore button. And one of the key things I think is really great here in this tool is the ability not just to view by a snapshot date or do a search by that, but also look at specific attributes that have changed or attributes that have that contain a specific word. So in the example here, we're looking for the attribute of job title. We've searched for that, and we can see all the previous timestamps of when the various changes have happened. So you can see the previous state and the new state. I mean, obviously you'll see here, I wouldn't anticipate people changing their job roles this frequently, but this is obviously our test environment just to show you, the kind of nuance of the different changes and how those attributes change over time. So if you wish to restore, it's very simple. Go into each attribute. You don't have to restore the whole object. You can be very granular about exactly what you want to restore, as you'd expect. So you can click on individual attributes and restore just those key pieces back into Entra. And one of the most important things here, as you'll see on the right hand side, is when you perform a restore, what we have is when you first initially create the Entra or install Entra and do the backup, we ask you to provision an app which allows and provides a privilege to do that. Now, obviously, with when you're performing a restore, really key that initial application doesn't have the ability to do a full restore. You can have that, but we recommend you don't. You keep outside of that. So what we do is when you want to perform a restore, we ask to elevate that privilege to then provide that restore. So it asks you to proceed. It will install the app for 30 minutes to allow you to perform restore, and then that application will then basically die. So again, keeping just the kind of backup read-only component in place. So really critical. So this is required not only to protect your environment, but it also adds another layer of security for your source of authority. And yeah, just quickly again on that kind of Entra backup piece. So on the activation at the beginning, you need to obviously create the app. but Dropsuite recognises the importance of splitting that backup and restore mechanism, right? So you elevate your privilege when you want to restore an item, which adheres to those security risk potentials, and make sure that you're only doing things when you know you need to. So in terms of talking to your clients, so what are the talking points here? So most of our MSPs don't really line up all their vendors and explain exactly where what the talking points are. What we want to do is talk about the business outcomes that the customer cares about, and those include security, compliance, governance, and management. And so, the whole element is about becoming that trusted advisor. So it's about demonstrating best practices. It's making sure that you are, explaining to them that they need to adhere, or showing them that you're adhering to the industry best practices. And as I mentioned before, Microsoft recommend and say you need to be ready for this. So baking that Entra backup into your managed service offering really does show to the customer that you're thinking and understanding about those requirements, and making sure you're adding value to that customer as well. So the idea is, you don't pitch Entra backup, because Entra and 365 are kind of one component. So it's about focusing on that business outcome of how you can restore your core 365 components, but also Entra is like a key component of that. So build into that kind of service offering. Avoid telling your customers how much protection. As a trusted advisor, you need to say, this is Microsoft's best practices. This is what you should be doing. And the idea is to, give that protection across the whole stack. In terms of vision and roadmap, so very quickly on this, I'm just looking at the time, just going to wrap up in a couple more slides. So obviously, this is a relatively new feature and product component for Dropsuite. So where we started is that operational backup piece, where we looked at just your core components, so your users and groups. Now we're moving more towards that governance and tenancy management. So looking at those kind of app registrations and making sure that you can track what has changed, so that policy drift, if you like. Where we're moving to in the future is, more auditing compliance piece. So tracking and management of that, in terms of that compliance. Automated informants of policies. So how, when a user gets added, potentially we make sure that they're added to specific groups, or you're aware of users that are added to specific groups and where there might be differences in the Entra objects. And then as we move, further down the track, we're looking at really providing that core cybersecurity recovery focus. So it's looking at complex scenarios, i.e. the recovery of a whole tenant, right? So if you've completely locked down and you can't get access to your tenant, it's about spinning up a brand new 365 tenant, restoring all your Entra objects onto that 365 Entra component, and then all of your M365 components on the top of that. So yeah, restoration of security and access controls, and integration of identity and their associated content. That's where we're kind of headed. Last couple of slides, just want to mention in the slide deck, we've got some excellent resources. So we've got some campaign material we can provide you with, kind of what we call a campaign in a box. So some really good marketing material to help you understand what Entra Backup is and how to work with your customers on that. A really good data sheet which explains the core components of Entra, obviously that important technical component. And then lastly, some information about some of the components we've discussed today, why MSPs can't afford to ignore Entra Backup. And then lastly, we've got a little QR code for you. So yeah, a little exclusive offer for webinar attendees. So we're offering a complimentary backup with every archiving license that is purchased before June 30th. So yeah, that's the end of my slides. I think I've just about got on time. Yep, exactly 10:30.
Yeah, thank you, James.
So,
very
cool.
interesting presentation, and obviously this exclusive offer. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at GridArt. We'll make sure to help you navigate this in the best possible way. I think we had a few questions from the audience. If we have just a few more secs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one is, are BitLocker keys included in the Entra backup?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, because BitLocker keys are obviously really core to the protection of devices, right? So, and how often do you actually note those BitLocker keys down across your customer estate? So those are not currently backed up, but we have a new set of enhancements being released at the end of May, and that will include BitLocker keys. So that in-tune device management piece is going to be extended to include BitLocker keys and some other components. If you go to the help center, so help@dropsuite.com, then you can actually subscribe to notifications on some of the new features and components that are coming out. But yeah, stay tuned on information. There will be some more kind of information coming out at the end of May. I don't have a full list of what is being released because we're just finalizing some of those last components. But yeah, some exciting enhancements coming at the end of the month. And good question.
Yeah. So another question here. So where is the Entra data stored?
Yeah, so I touched on that briefly earlier. So we have data centers around the globe, but I didn't specifically mention we use AWS as our core kind of infrastructure partner. So what that means is that we are agnostic to Microsoft or obviously Google as well. So again, you don't want to keep all your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure that you can get access to your data. So for example, if there is a huge Microsoft outage or malware attack, you don't want to have the data that you've backed up in Microsoft. Much better to have a solution that's focused within another software stack. And what we have is, as I mentioned before, data centers around the globe. So you can be strategic about where you back up your data to. Obviously, in Europe, we've got a number of data centers that kind of follow the AWS model. So you can choose which ones. But yeah, we've got, typically, I think three different data centers available in Europe. And that allows you to kind of focus and keep your data secure and also adhere to sort of data sovereignty requirements as well within the EU.
Yep, brilliant. Last one then. How does the licensing model work?
Yeah, so I mentioned those SKUs earlier. So Entra bolts onto those either backup or backup archiving SKUs. So when you purchase if you've got a tenant of say 100 mailboxes, you've got 20 of those as shared mailboxes. You don't pay for those, but you've got say 80 users which you want to back up. So you'd pay for 80 license seats to access and back up Microsoft 365 content. If you bolted Entra on top of that, then you would pay additional premium just for those Entra components for 80 seats. So we basically base that on the Entra based on the seat count that you're backing up for each of your tenants or your partner's tenants.
Yep, brilliant. And that's available in our marketplace for anyone who wants to have a look at the pricing. Just add Dropsuite as a vendor to your own portfolio, and then you can go ahead and have a look at the pricing for the SKUs from Dropsuite. I think that's it in terms of questions. Obviously, if anyone wants to ask James anything, feel free to raise your hand. And if not, feel free to drop him an email later on. You can always reach out to us directly. And we want to thank you all for participating in today's webinar. And as you can see on the screen, I want to highlight that as well. Obviously, you can you can get free NFR licenses if you
Yes.
want to start using it yourself to feel comfortable in obviously selling it forward to your customers. So yeah, from our side, once again, huge thank you for attending today, and we'll speak to you all soon. And thank you, James, for a great presentation, and looking forward to working closely with you guys at Dropsuite in obviously spreading the Entra ID backup across our channel here in the Nordics.
No, thank you, Simon, and thanks to Good Heart, and yeah, thanks everyone for attending today, and yeah, enjoy the day.
Thanks. Bye everyone.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Tack alla. Hej då.